And now listen as I tell you how Henry's world enlarged. The road was hastily approved, and soon men and equipment were swarming all up and down the pike. The commissioners visited the scene themselves with the county engineers, and the right-of-way was secured from all involved parties. It upset Henry because when the 40-foot right-of-way was staked off, it took out the big mulberry tree in the corner of his barn lot, and he had to move his fence in places, and somehow it irritated him to think of strangers defiling the sanctity of Salem Pike. But he remembered what Charlie had said about not being able to fight progress, so he just busied himself in the back meadows plowing and disking and pretended like nothing was happening. But it was. Several months later, the dust had settled, the dozers and trucks were removed, the last red flag stakes pulled up, final inspections made, and Salem Pike had somehow been transformed into a 30-foot blacktop with a shiny white line down the middle. The commissioners had been real considerate, and they placed a cattle crossing sign at the barn lot, but in the days ahead, nobody seemed to pay too much attention to it. Soon the traffic from Chamberstown to Willoughby zoomed by Whispering Pines at 60 miles per hour, and Henry never realized how many people he and Esther seemed to know, for almost every one of them blew their horn in passing. Not many of them stopped. And when they did, it was to say they had just been driving by and stopped to say hello, which they did, and then drove on. Henry and Esther were amazed at how many people had so many places to go and so many things to do. They noted that often they saw the same car making 2 and 3 trips a day to Willoughby or to Chamberstown, and marveled at how complex their lives must be to require so much business in that city. Nothing changed in the Morgans' life at once. Nothing, that is, until the second trip to Willoughby on Saturday to do their shopping. That was the day the mares bolted into the ditch when the tractor-trailer came too close and the wagon nearly upset. Henry did get upset, and he shouted things he shouldn't have at the driver. Of course, he could hardly hear him or care, for by that time he was 2 miles down the pike. When Henry came home that day, he told Esther he just couldn't take the team to town anymore. Not only was it dangerous to get out on the highway, but he couldn't stand the remarks and the embarrassment to the children when they came in the wagon to Weigel's. Henry had seen Fred Danner at the store that day, and Fred said he'd be glad to stop by for Henry any Saturday he wanted to come to town, and that seemed to be the answer. The following weeks, Henry rode to Willoughby with Fred, and all went well until he overheard a remark at the post office about people that imposed on their neighbors when they could have their own car as well as the next man. This troubled Henry and Esther, for they had never been people to impose on anyone, and if it worked a hardship on Fred that they didn't know about, well, there was but one thing to do, and that was to see about a car. Henry got a ride to Chamberstown with Ed Stevens on the following Tuesday, the day he had set aside to cultivate the cornfield. While Ed tended to his business at the courthouse, Henry looked over the used cars. He was shocked at the prices they asked and learned that the cars carried no guarantee or warranty of any kind. He learned a new phrase that all of them used, as is. He came home discouraged and told Esther that a used car would wipe out his savings, for any car that would be decent would cost $1,000. And that was almost the exact amount of what he had been saving for a rainy day. Well, he joked, maybe this is the rainy day we've been expecting, but to tell you the truth, I never expected such a storm. The following Monday, the day he thought sure he'd get the big meadow mowed, he and Esther went to Chamberstown to see about the car. Henry said he thought if they rode in with Mr. Weigel, who always went there early on Monday to see about merchandise, they could be back by noon. So they arrived and were taken in tow by a friendly used car salesman who soon fixed them up with a real sharp 4-year-old car that was a one-owner, local driver car, good as new, and would give years of trouble-free service, he said. Well, this relieved Henry considerably, for the thought of any repairs or further expense frightened him. The deal almost fell through when Henry told the man that $1,000 was all the money he had, and the man told him there was an additional $55 for taxes, license, and title transfer. Henry hadn't thought of that, and the man had failed to tell him that part the time before. So after calling the manager, there was further kindness shown to Henry by the good manager agreeing to knock off $55 from the price as a personal favor to Henry. This unexpected kindness impressed Henry, and as he later told Esther, it sure proved the honesty of those people. Since the car was automatic, there was nothing in learning how to operate it, and after a visit to the courthouse, Henry obtained a learner's permit, and off he and Esther went in a cloud of exhaust, just like Ed Stevens said he would do, cruising down the big road in their new car. Henry had to admit it gave him a sense of power as he cruised down the highway toward Whispering Pines. They thought it'd be a good surprise to drop by the school and pick up the kids on the way home. As they pulled in the schoolyard, a sense of pride swept over Henry as the kids admired his car and showed it to their friends. He was consoled as they drove homeward, and he heard the excited chatter of the children in the back seat planning all the places they could go now, and Henry wondered if maybe this wasn't one of the good things in life he had heard so much about.